For decades after the Second World War, the cold waters of the Baltic Sea kept their secrets well. Beneath its gray surface, hundreds of wrecks lie scattered across the seabed, silent witnesses to one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. Among them is a German submarine whose story vanished into uncertainty in the final, chaotic months of the war. This is the story of U-479, a Type VIIC U-boat of Nazi Germany's Kriegsmarine, lost in 1944 and forgotten for generations, its fate obscured by wartime confusion, conflicting reports, and the unforgiving depths of the sea. What happened to U-479 is not just a mystery of metal and machinery, but a human story shaped by fear, duty, and the relentless pressure of a collapsing empire. By 1944, the German U-boat campaign had already turned decisively against the Third Reich. In the early years of the war, submarines had been Germany's most powerful naval weapon, striking Allied shipping across the Atlantic and choking supply lines with terrifying efficiency. But technological advances by the Allies had changed the balance of power. Radar, sonar, depth charges, improved convoy tactics, and growing air coverage transformed the ocean into a deadly hunting ground for submarines. Losses mounted, experienced commanders were killed, and new crews were sent into battle with limited training and dwindling hope. Yet even as defeat loomed, U-boats continued to patrol, driven by orders that allowed no retreat. U-479 was commissioned in late 1943, at a time when Germany's submarine force was already under severe strain. Built as part of the reliable but increasingly vulnerable Type VIIC class, the boat measured just over 67 meters in length and displaced around 760 tons on the surface. It carried a crew of roughly 50 men, most of them young, many barely out of their teens, trained to endure months in claustrophobic conditions, surrounded by steel, darkness, and the constant threat of sudden death. Life aboard was defined by routine and tension, cramped sleeping quarters, stale air, diesel fumes, and the ever-present knowledge that a single mistake could be fatal. Unlike earlier U-boats that roamed the Atlantic, U-479 was assigned to operations in the Baltic Sea, a region that had become increasingly important as German forces retreated on the Eastern Front. The Baltic was no safe haven. Soviet naval forces were growing stronger, and the sea was heavily mined by both sides. German submarines were tasked with laying mines, disrupting Soviet shipping, and defending evacuation routes used to transport troops and civilians fleeing the advance of the Red Army. These missions were dangerous and often thankless, conducted in shallow waters where submarines had little room to maneuver or hide. In the summer of 1944, U-479 departed on what would become its final patrol. Official records indicate that the submarine was operating in the Gulf of Finland, a narrow and heavily fortified stretch of water between modern-day Finland and Estonia. This area was one of the most dangerous maritime zones of the war. Dense minefields, anti-submarine nets, patrol vessels, and constant surveillance turned every mission into a gamble. For a submarine crew, the threat did not always come from enemy weapons alone. Mines, invisible and unforgiving, could destroy a boat without warning, leaving no survivors and no clear record of what had happened. The last known communications from U-479 were routine, offering no hint of disaster. Then, suddenly, the submarine failed to return. No distress signal was received. No confirmed attack was reported by Soviet forces. Like many wartime losses, U-479 simply disappeared, swallowed by the sea and recorded as missing. In the confusion of 1944, as German command structures broke down and records became incomplete or contradictory, the fate of the submarine remained unresolved. Some reports suggested it may have struck a mine. Others speculated it was sunk by Soviet anti-submarine forces. Without physical evidence, none of these theories could be confirmed. After the war, the Baltic Sea became a graveyard of unresolved history. Cold, low in salt, and relatively dark, its waters preserved wrecks far better than the open ocean. Yet for decades, political tensions and limited technology made deep-sea exploration difficult. The Cold War turned the Baltic into a heavily monitored military zone, and many wrecks remained untouched. U-479 was one of many submarines listed as lost, its crew officially presumed dead, its location unknown. Interest in sunken submarines grew slowly over the late 20th century as underwater exploration technology advanced. Side-scan sonar, remotely operated vehicles, and high-resolution imaging allowed researchers to search the seabed with unprecedented precision. At the same time, historians began re-examining wartime naval records, comparing German and Soviet archives that had once been sealed. These efforts revealed inconsistencies in loss reports and hinted that some submarines had been misidentified or incorrectly logged. The hunt for U-479 gained momentum when sonar surveys in the Gulf of Finland detected an unidentified submarine-shaped wreck resting on the seabed. The wreck lay upright, its hull largely intact, suggesting it had not been destroyed by a direct depth-charge attack. Its position corresponded roughly to the area where U-479 was believed to have been operating during its final mission. For researchers, this discovery offered the first tangible clue in a mystery that had endured for nearly 80 years. Detailed analysis of the wreck revealed features consistent with a Type VIIC submarine. The bow torpedo tubes, the conning tower structure, and the general dimensions all matched German design specifications. There were no visible signs of catastrophic structural damage, reinforcing the theory that the submarine may have struck a mine. Mines were among the most feared hazards of the Baltic. Unlike active attacks, a mine strike could occur without warning, tearing open the hull in seconds and giving the crew little chance to respond. Inside the wreck, time appeared frozen. Personal items remained scattered where they had fallen. Equipment lay in place, untouched since the day the submarine sank. For historians and archaeologists, such wrecks are not just military artifacts but war graves. The crew of U-479 never escaped. Their final moments remain unknowable, but the silence of the wreck speaks to the suddenness of their fate. The identification of the submarine as U-479 was supported by careful comparison with historical patrol routes and minefield maps. German records indicated that U-479 was operating in an area known to be heavily mined, including fields laid by German forces themselves. Friendly mines accounted for numerous submarine losses during the war, a grim reminder of how chaotic and dangerous naval operations had become. In such conditions, even precise navigation could not guarantee safety. What makes the story of U-479 particularly haunting is how representative it is of the final phase of the U-boat war. By 1944, Germany's submarine crews were fighting a losing battle. Many understood the odds but continued their missions out of duty, discipline, or the belief that survival depended on obedience. The young men aboard U-479 were part of this generation, sent into peril with limited hope of return. The discovery of the wreck does not rewrite history, but it deepens our understanding of it. It confirms that U-479 was not lost to legend or rumor, but to the same brutal realities that claimed thousands of lives at sea. It also highlights the importance of underwater archaeology in resolving long-standing historical questions. Each wreck located and identified adds clarity to a conflict, often remembered through maps and documents rather than physical remains. Today, the wreck of U-479 rests undisturbed on the seabed, protected as a war grave. It serves as a silent memorial to its crew and as a reminder of the cost of war beneath the waves. The Baltic Sea, once a battleground, now holds these relics in quiet custody, preserving them for future generations to study and remember. The hunt for U-479 was never just about finding a submarine. It was about restoring a lost chapter of history, giving form to a disappearance, and acknowledging the human lives bound forever to a steel hull beneath the sea. In the end, the secrets of U-479 were not dramatic revelations of hidden weapons or last-minute heroics. They were the simple, sobering truths of naval warfare in its final, desperate stage. A submarine sent on a mission from which it never returned, a crew that vanished without a final message, and a wreck that waited decades to be found, holding its silence until technology and time finally allowed the past to resurface.